Realism is a prominent theory in international relations. It offers a lens through which we can understand the actions of states on the world stage. At its core, realism posits that states are the primary actors in the international system. This system, crucially, lacks any overarching authority. It is anarchic. In this environment, states are primarily driven by self-interest and the pursuit of power. They are constantly seeking to ensure their survival in a world where they can never be certain of the intentions of others. Realism emphasizes the importance of military strength. States must be prepared to defend themselves by force if necessary. Diplomacy and cooperation, while not entirely absent, are always subservient to the cold calculations of power politics. Trust is in short supply in the realist world. Agreements between states are only as good as the power dynamics that underpin them. When those dynamics shift, agreements can quickly crumble. This brings us to the tragic conflict in Ukraine. Russia's decision to invade its neighbor, while shocking to many, can be seen as a textbook example of realist logic in action. For years, Russia had been voicing its security concerns about NATO expansion eastward. From Moscow's perspective, the West was encroaching on its sphere of influence, potentially placing hostile military forces right on its doorstep. Understanding realism is essential to grasping the complexities of international politics. It helps explain why states act as they do, even when those actions seem irrational or morally reprehensible. By applying realism's core principles to the Ukraine crisis, we can gain a clearer understanding of the motivations, calculations, and potential outcomes of this conflict. In the following sections, we will delve deeper into these aspects of the conflict, examining how realism illuminates the events that have unfolded and their implications for the future. Power in the realist view is the currency of international relations. It's the means by which states protect their interests and ultimately their survival. Military might is the most obvious manifestation of power. A large and well-equipped army, for example, it gives the state the ability to deter aggression or to win wars should deterrence fail. But power is not limited to military hardware. Economic strength is also vital. A robust economy provides the resources to sustain a powerful military and to exert influence through trade and investment. Security for a state means ensuring its continued existence. This is the paramount goal. To achieve security, states seek to maximize their power relative to others. This relentless pursuit of power often leads to competition and conflict. States are constantly jockeying for position, wary of any move by a rival that might upset the balance of power. Russia's actions in Ukraine must be seen through this lens. Moscow views the expansion of NATO as a direct threat to its security. Each new member state brought the alliance closer to Russia's borders. The possibility of Ukraine joining NATO was particularly alarming for the Kremlin. Ukraine shares a long border with Russia and has historical, cultural, and linguistic ties that make it distinct from other former Soviet republics. From Russia's perspective, a NATO-aligned Ukraine was unacceptable. It would shift the balance of power decisively in NATO's favor, effectively boxing in Russia and leaving it vulnerable. The annexation of Crimea in 2014 and the subsequent support for separatists in eastern Ukraine were early attempts to prevent this outcome. The full-scale invasion in 2022 was a dramatic escalation, but one that followed logically from Russia's security concerns, as understood through the realist lens. The international system as realists see it is not one of equality. Some states are simply more powerful than others. These are the great powers. They possess disproportionate military, economic, and political clout. Their actions shape the global order. For realists, understanding international politics means understanding the dynamics of great power competition. Central to this competition is the concept of spheres of influence. These are regions of the world where great powers seek to maintain dominance. They are seen as vital to a great power's security and interests. Russia, for example, has long considered its near abroad, the former Soviet republics, as its sphere of influence. These countries are seen as buffer zones, essential to Russian security. The United States, too, operates with a sphere of influence, though it is often described in less provocative terms. The Western Hemisphere, particularly Latin America, has historically been considered within the US sphere. Any attempt by a rival power to establish a foothold in this region would be met with swift and decisive opposition. The conflict in Ukraine is, at its core, a clash of spheres of influence. Russia is attempting to reassert its dominance in its near abroad. It is seeking to prevent Ukraine from drifting into the Western orbit. The United States and its NATO allies, for their part, are determined to deny Russia this victory. They see it as vital to upholding the principle that sovereign states have the right to choose their own alliances. This clash highlights a fundamental tension in international relations. On the one hand, there is the principle of state sovereignty, enshrined in the United Nations Charter. This principle holds that all states are equal and have the right to determine their own affairs without interference. On the other hand, there is the reality of great power politics, where might often makes right. Realism suggests that this tension is unlikely to be resolved anytime soon. Proponents of international law often argue that it can help to mitigate conflict and promote cooperation between states. They point to institutions like the United Nations and the International Criminal Court as evidence of the system's potential. Realists, however, are deeply skeptical of these claims. They argue that international law is merely a tool that states use to advance their interests when it suits them. When it does not, they will readily disregard it. The UN Security Council, the most powerful body within the United Nations, is a case in point. The veto power held by the 5 permanent members, the US, Russia, China, France, and the United Kingdom, ensures that the Council cannot take any action that would seriously harm the interests of these great powers. This effectively renders the Council toothless in the face of great power competition. The International Criminal Court, ICC, has also proven to be ineffective in constraining powerful states. The ICC's mandate is to prosecute individuals for genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. However, the court can only exercise its jurisdiction if the accused is a national of a state party to the Rome Statute, the treaty that established the ICC, or if the alleged crimes were committed on the territory of a state party. This gives powerful states, many of whom are not parties to the Rome Statute, a significant degree of impunity. The conflict in Ukraine provides further evidence of the limitations of international law. Russia, as a permanent member of the UN Security Council, was able to veto any resolution condemning its invasion. The ICCC, meanwhile, has been unable to launch a full investigation into alleged war crimes committed in Ukraine because Russia is not a state party to the Rome Statute. These examples illustrate a key realist insight. International law is only as strong as the states that are willing to enforce it. In a world where power ultimately resides with states, and where self-interest reigns supreme, international law will always be subservient to the dictates of realpolitik.